My name is Danny Bolduc. I'm from Waterville. I have lived in Maine my entire life, pretty much, with stints a couple of different places here and there, but basically I've been a part of Maine all my life, and hockey has been a part of Maine and myself all my life. I come from a large family of 7 boys and 2 girls, and certainly was a lot of fun, never a dull moment growing up. I enjoyed it. We lived in a small, quiet neighborhood. My mother and father were both born in Maine, raised in Maine, and my father in particular took a special interest in hockey. He would build us a hockey rink in the wintertime, and all the brothers and my sisters, in fact, would go out and skate and try to play hockey. Of course, women's hockey was not big back then, but certainly is now. They would have been good. But anyway, as I mentioned, in Maine, I clearly recall not only just playing hockey, but being involved in Little League baseball, Pop Warner football. That was so very, very important. Just having a place where, essentially you're not going to get into trouble if you're active and you're doing things. And I think that's how my father operated. He wanted to make sure that we had something that we enjoyed, that we liked, and he took, he picked sports, and sure enough, we loved it. So it was my early childhood memories are very fond ones. And in fact, as I get a chance now for the very first time to pause and reflect on my career in hockey and just my stay here in Maine and why that was so important to me and why now I'm still here. There's tons of reasons, and of course the biggest one is that we just love Maine. I love Maine, and as I think back, there are 3 kind of special events with Maine ties and my ties to sports in Maine. And the first one happened when I was 9 years old. Our Pee Wee hockey team from Waterville, Maine, made it all the way to the national championship tournament in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. Doing something like that, I'll never forget it. I think about it all the time. And to me, it's equivalent to playing in the Little League World Series. And for a young boy, that's what you strive for. And not only did we get to do that once, we actually repeated and became New England champions the following year, and then had another opportunity to play in a national championship at age 9 and 10. I really enjoyed that. I was fortunate enough both years to be named the most valuable player in the tournament, which was quite an honor. And I don't believe, and I've been told, that it's ever happened even to this day. So those are just events that really stick in your mind, stay with you, and I just love it. The second event that happened in my life that had Maine ties to it, I was pretty much 24 years old, and I played one hockey game, my first hockey game with the Detroit Red Wings in the National Hockey League. And with that first game, I became the very first player from the state of Maine to have played in the Olympics, which I did in 1976 in Innsbruck, Austria, and to play in the NHL. No one had done that before, so I felt very, very proud of that. And the third event occurred after I was done my pro career, and I was elected into the Maine Sports Hall of Fame. And now I'm up there with all the good guys in all the sports, and it's a special award and something that made me feel very, very comfortable. Throughout my career, there's a lot of things that have happened, a lot of special moments, and people often ask me, gee, what was it like? What were you, what did you do? How'd you survive? And because I was the first one, and what was so special for you? I said, well, as I think back, playing against Bobby Orr. I mean, that really sticks out. And I remember playing against Bobby Orr for the very first time. And believe it or not, that has a Maine connection. And so the year was 1976. I had played in the Olympics in February. Of course, Olympics are always in February. Came home, got married that summer, and then in the following fall, I turned pro, or was about to turn pro. And they had another tournament that they were trying to put together called the Canada Cup. It was a very prestigious tournament in that the theory was, unlike the Olympics back then, pros could not play in the Olympics. So Canada, of course, was one country that was very upset about something like that. And so they proposed this Canada Cup tournament. And each country could field whomever they wanted, pro or otherwise, or amateur. And so it was truly a collection now of the greatest players to play in that era. And so it was called the Canada Cup. It was in Quebec City. And because it was so close to Maine, I must have had, I recall, 80 people, my family, friends from Maine, that all came up there to watch the game, to watch me play against Bobby Orr. And of course, it was such a thrill for me. So Canada, as I mentioned, was very loaded with talent. They had Guy Lafleur and Phil Esposito and Bobby Hull and all the great players, and of course, Bobby Orr. And so my family was in the stands as the game is about to be played, and the place is just jammed-packed, and it's electric, you know. And so my little nephew, he was 9 years old at the time, and he's looking down at the ice, and he's saying, "Where's Uncle Danny? Where's Uncle Danny?" And my brother quickly says, "Oh, he's out there. He'll play. Just wait." So the game starts, and back then I was on the third line, and so the game starts, and true to form, Team Canada was all over the United States, and they were just shooting left and right, but there was a whistle that blew, and no goal, and now it was time for the second line to come out on the ice. And there's my nephew yelling to my brother, saying, "Where's Uncle Danny? Where's Uncle Danny? We want to see Uncle Danny." And it was so funny because my brother said, "Oh, he'll be there. He's coming. He's coming." So the next shift goes on, and there's a whistle, and sure enough, now it's time for the third line, and out on the ice I jump. Well, right at the same exact time, Bobby Orr stepped out on the ice for his first shift of the game. Now, he was just coming off a knee injury, and the place was just going wild. They proceeded to give him an 11-minute standing ovation. The game was stopped. It was incredible. And after the 11-minute ovation, everyone settled down, and we were about ready to play, and my little nephew turns to his father, and he says, "Boy, they really like Uncle Danny." And to which my brother replied, "Yes, they do." And so there was an event that was not really hockey related that is so special in my life. The mere fact that he said that, and it just came down. So that was a pretty cool thing. Now, there's been so many other things. For instance, I mentioned the Olympics. Now, the Olympics were in Innsbruck, Austria. And here I am from Waterville, Maine, and I've had limited travel in my life, and now all of a sudden I'm on the world stage. And we're in Innsbruck, Austria. Everyone is watching you, and it was quite an event. I get chills and thrills and everything every time I think about it. And so to get there, though, was quite a process to make the Olympic team. Just about everyone wanted to be on the Olympic team back then. And I remember they had tryouts in the summer prior to the Olympics, which are in February, so that summer before. They had 3 tryout camps, one in the east, one in the central United States, and one out west. And each tryout camp must have had 300 or 400 players. It was phenomenal and incredible how they could, pare it down as quickly as they did. But you went there pretty much for a whole week. And at each camp, they whittled it down to 25 players would make the advancement to the final camp. And so 75 of us were in the final camp. And again, I worked, I trained incredibly. But here in Maine, in the summertime, there's very little to no ice time available. So that put me at a disadvantage. But I figured, well, you can do one of two things. You can quit, or you can figure out how you're going to look good. And so I worked hard. I worked hard with things like shooting pucks off of a piece of plywood, not on ice. But I worked on lifting weights. I worked on riding and riding a bicycle, running, so that I was in tip-top shape. And I went there. I played my best hockey, and I kept my fingers crossed. And they came in, and they were making their final cuts, and they actually met with you one-on-one. And I remember Coach Bob Johnson coming to me, and he said, "Bolduc, we're going to take a chance on you. You are the 20th player that we're going to pick for this team. We think you have a lot of chances to improve, We think you've got a lot of talent, and we think you're going to prosper in the next 9 months under my leadership," Bob was saying. And so I was thrilled to the bone. Went to the Olympics, and but again, prior to the Olympics, it involved a exhibition series of 50 games this season. We played all over the United States, all over Europe. It was really a fascinating year, a time for me just to see all of the United States, to go to countries that I've never been to, and it was amazing. And on the 60th game, we're playing against Yale University. And don't you think that I break my hand? And this is where the Olympics now becomes a main event. I break my hand, and I am so discouraged because I think I'm not going to get a chance to play in the Olympics. And at that time, the Olympic trainer was none other than Carl Nelson from Waterville. And Carl met with me as soon as I arrived in Innsbruck. Together, he and his staff made a special cast, lightweight, with the limited materials that they had at their disposal. And I was able to fit that cast on, put my glove in there, and actually play in the Olympics. And I ended up scoring 2 goals. And so I'm quite proud of that. Those are things that occur behind the scenes that most people don't know about. But sometimes you have to play hurt, and that's what happened there. So it was just an incredible, incredible event. And again, probably my fondest memory is when the national anthem was played in the opening ceremonies. Again, not having anything to do with hockey necessarily, but still one of a very special moments just to see and participate with the American team coming down and entering the stadium. It was something I'll never forget. So, and then 20 years later, I did have an opportunity to carry the Olympic torch. They contacted me as a prior Olympian and asked me, would you be interested in carrying the torch for the Atlanta Games, where Muhammad Ali was the athlete who ended up lighting the final, he was the final leg of carrying the torch. And so I had an opportunity to run 1.25 miles with the torch up above my head. And if you don't think that that was something you have to be prepared for, the man who handed me the torch said, "Get ready for the thrill of your life." And I said, "The thrill of your life? I've played in the Olympics. This is going to be a piece of cake." I got the flame. I started running, and the fans were cheering. I was in tears, and my knees were shaking, and it was another situation where you're just so proud to be, doing something for your country and taking part in an event that literally everyone would love to have done. And so for me, it was just very, very special. Prior to that, and this is another part of the Olympic story, I was at Harvard at the time. And in order to play in the Olympics, I made the Olympic team, but I had to make an incredible decision, and that was I needed to leave school in order to play for the Olympic team. So after my junior year, I left Harvard for what I consider honorable reasons, and I made a pact with myself because I knew that I wanted to pursue hockey to its fullest. But I made a pact with myself, and I said, if ever something gets in the way and I don't make it, or I can't get a job because I have not graduated from college, if anything ever gets in the way, I will be right back in school to get my degree. Well, as life, has a way of unfolding, it didn't happen for me. Things came together. I got a job after playing pro hockey, and I didn't have an occasion where I needed to go back to school necessarily, so I didn't. That part eats at me a little bit, but I'm still proud of the way it all came down and the success that I've had. When I was at Harvard, I played, the freshmen could not play on the varsity. And as I said, I was only there for 3 years. And so I had my sophomore year and my junior year. And both years, we made it to the Frozen Four, which means the Final Four, which means I was playing for a national championship again. So I did it when I was 9 and 10 years old, and then I did it again in college 2 times, playing for a national championship. And again, that was very, very special. I ended up setting a record at Harvard, which I still think stands today, which was the fastest 2 goals and the fastest 3 goals ever scored by one person. And so on one night we were playing against Clarkson, and they sent me out on one of my shifts, and I scored a goal. So we go and we line up for the face-off, and it just happened, the puck bounced, and I darted in, and I scored another goal 6 seconds later. And so that was the fastest 2 goals. And don't you think on that same shift before it was over, because I'd only been out there for 6 seconds, pretty much, I ended up scoring another goal so the whole shift was 1 minute and 18 seconds. And to this day, I believe it still is a record, but I'm not sure. Playing pro hockey was something that was, it's a totally different thing. By far, my greatest and most fun was that year in the Olympics. Now, when you turn professional, all the bets are off. You're playing for money. You're playing in a serious situation, and you're playing with a wife and child that you now have to support, and there's just so many other dynamics that come into play. It's very tough. For instance, when back when I had an opportunity to get into the pros and play, I was signed to a 10-day tryout. That was it. I mean, there was no $40 million, Dan, 4 years like they do today. No, it was a 10-day contract. And in essence, they give you 10 days to show them what you can do and that you belong. Again, going back to Maine, and Maine keeps coming up throughout my entire life, the general manager of the New England or the Hartford Whalers was Ron Ryan, who was a graduate of Colby College and someone that I knew. And he was interested in having me play and have my pro career with them. But he calls me in the night before the 10 games, and he says, Dan, there's a lot of things about you that we like. We really think you're a fast skater. We know you can skate faster than most of the players at this level. You have been a good goal scorer throughout your career, but this is another level. We want to see, if you can score goals at this level. And then finally, we also want to see, if you get an opportunity, we want you to fight. I'm saying to myself, they want me to fight. This was not really into my repertoire of things, but in the NHL or the WHA or pro hockey, you have to be able to do that. So here I am. I've got to, get decisions to be made. I've got to play well, and I've got 10 games to do it. So don't you think in game 2, I was playing out by the top of the key, and I block a shot, and the puck flips out into the neutral zone, and I used my speed, and off I went, and I'm finding myself going in all alone on a breakaway with the goalie. Well, I think I'm all alone, when to my left, there's Dave Keon. He's now a Hall of Famer, my teammate, and he is yelling at me to pass him the puck. All I can think about is that they said, if you get a chance, we want to see if you can score. And so now, and I know in my mind that the right thing to do is to pass this puck over to my teammate. But I'm going down and I'm thinking, believe me, you don't have much time when you go from the red line in. And I had all these thoughts. And I'm thinking about my wife, and I'm thinking about our baby. And now I've got to make this decision. So I go in, I look over at Dave Keon, and I give him the biggest fake you've ever seen in your life. I draw the puck back, take a shot, and I score a goal. Well, I am so, so excited. But there's Dave Keon. He wouldn't talk to me for 3 months after that. He was just, it was as if I didn't even exist on the team, because in his mind, I should have given it to him. And I know I should have given it to him, but I wanted to make a life for myself, and that's what I did. So now in game 7, 7 of the 10, this guy, the game is going on, it's getting heated, and this guy comes up to me and pretty much says, you want to go? You want to fight? And I said, oh yeah, I forgot about that. They want me to fight. They want to see if I can fight. And so there's no getting out of it. And so I drop my gloves, and I immediately throw one punch at the player. Then I take my 2 hands, grab his arms, and put my head into his chest, and then we wrestled. So I get all done, and then the 10 games were done, and I go up to the general manager's office, and he says, well, you had a fight, man, you did well, and you scored some goals. I had scored maybe 2 or 3 others. You've done very well, and so we want to sign you to a contract. Well, they did, signed me to a nice 2-year contract, and I never fought again in the NHL or in the WHA. Now, is that being deceptive? I don't know, but I guess in life, especially when it's a job and business, you have to make decisions, and that just wasn't me. I was a skilled player. I didn't enjoy the fighting. It wasn't that I wasn't afraid. I just, they have rules in boxing that prohibit fighters in different weight classes from fighting. But in hockey, if someone is 6'4" and I was 5'9", and they challenge you to a fight, you were expected to fight. And I just thought that was a bit much. So I just shied away from that as much as I could. But overall, it was fantastic. I mean, I probably could talk forever on these things, but it was, Gordie Howe, the greatest player ever. And the stories that I have of Gordie, again, that I like to tell, that are special to me, are really not that much hockey related. For instance, I once hired a photographer and told that photographer that in the middle of the game I would be coming off a shift and I would purposely go sit next to Gordie Howe. And when I do, I want you to come running down there and take a picture of our names. Our names would be on our back, so that I could have that as a treasure, a memento for me. And sure enough, he did. And I was just kind of proud of that. And then also along another line, when you went on the road, you never knew who your roommate was going to be. They never told you beforehand. And you would always meet in the lobby of the hotel, and the general manager or the manager, the business manager, would come out and say the names of who the 2 roommates were, and they would give you a key, or 2 keys, in one envelope, which would have the names of the 2 guys. And so I said, geez, it would be nice to room once in my life with Gordie Howe, but I said, that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And sure enough, after you play 40 games at home, 40 games on the road, well, one of the things, the general manager comes out and he says, Gordie Howe and Dan Bolduc. Well, I literally ran up there before Gordie could get there so I could grab the envelope, and I purposely took the key out and gave it to him, and I kept the envelope that said Gordie Howe, Danny Bolduc, room 226, and kept that as a memento. So special things like that were very near and dear to me. I married Jane Mitchell, the daughter of John Swisher Mitchell. And of course, a lot of people in the basketball world here in Maine knew of John as one of the greatest players to play basketball. And he also was a member of the Maine Sports Hall of Fame, and truly a great guy. And as far as fathers-in-law go, I don't believe there can be another better one than that man, because he was absolutely wonderful. But I do have to tell you that, of course, he was all basketball, and I was all hockey. And so we both wondered, I'm sure, how's this going to work out, And Jane, of course, was big into basketball. We got to be able to make this happen. Well, first I want to report that I'm still married to Jane, so I'm very, very happy about that. So it did work out fine. But I will say that one of the things that Swisher did was he knew that I wasn't going to be playing any basketball, and he knew that I wasn't really going to be talking too much about strategy of basketball. So Swisher took it upon himself to learn about the game of hockey. And that man was so smart. He read, he talked, he asked questions, and within 3 years, he was asking me skilled questions that people in the know in the NHL would be asking about strategy and about this and that. So I was quite impressed with all that, until the day that he came to me and he crossed the line. Johnny Mitchell, he crossed the line. And he says to me, Danny, I got to tell you, you've got it easy. You have got it easy in hockey. I had it so much harder in basketball. So I said, well, how so? I mean, what do you mean? He says, well, look at it. You've got this little puck, and you've got this huge goal, and you're shooting a little puck into this big goal, and that's easy. But I've got this big ball, and I've got to put it into a small rim. And so that's got to be harder for me. So he says, you've got it easy. Your sport is easy. So I really had to think on my feet, and I immediately said to, okay, Swish, so I have it easy. So what happens here when you're dribbling the ball down the court and you're driving in the lane, and all of a sudden the whistle blows, and the referee comes over and says, Johnny, someone touched you. Why don't you have a free shot? So Swish, you go to the line and you get a free shot. That's the easiest thing I've ever seen in my life. And then, oh, by the way, you missed that first shot, and the referee comes over and says, Johnny, you missed that shot. Why don't you take another free shot and have two? I said, Swish, you're the one who's got it easy. So we kind of went back and forth on all of that, but he was a great guy, and he recently passed away, and I was just proud of the accomplishments that he did. He was proud of the accomplishments that I was able to do. And downstairs in my home, we have two pictures, and there's a picture of me and Gordie Howe on that bench that photographer took. And then beside that picture, there's a picture of him and Bob Cousy. And the symbolism there is, there's John Swisher Mitchell from a small town in Waterville, Maine, playing against Bob Cousy, one of the greatest players ever to play that sport. And there's Danny Bolduc from a small town in Waterville, Maine, playing with one of the greatest players to play in the sport. And here we are, making our way in the world. I believe there are a lot of advantages coming up the way I was brought up. My father, when he built that hockey rink, with it came the ability to play on the rink, but also with it came responsibility. My father would always make us shovel, scrape the rink, keep it clean, so that at night he would go out and water down the rink. So each day we had a fresh sheet of ice, and it was beautiful. And but the other things that were involved in that, the other advantages, an outdoor rink in your backyard is much smaller than a regular size rink. So therefore, you must hone your skills in a smaller area, and therefore you become quicker, and you really have to execute those moves quicker. And then when you get out onto the bigger pond or rink, you then have the ability to maybe shine, because you could do this so much faster than everyone else. And I think that did help me at age 9. But it also, when you're organizing with friends and playing on the rink, you're enjoying yourself. You're taking control. You're setting rules. You're essentially becoming a man. I mean, you're just in it to see if it can succeed. You're in it to make sure everyone is happy. You're in it to compete. All of the things that you're going to need later on in life, that's why you're out there doing that. And you don't realize it, but you're learning all of those qualities at a young age, so that when you actually get exposed to that, it's second nature to you. So I thank my father for not making us go out and play, but for giving us an opportunity to choose if we wanted to go out and play. I can strictly, unbelievably remember there was another rink in the neighborhood, big one, called the South End Arena, but it was an outdoor rink. And in it, they had a warming shed and also a pool table. And so as I got older, I went to my father and I asked him, Dad, can I get out and play on the rink down the neighbors there, down the road? And he said, yeah, you can play. It's cold tonight. He said, but I don't want you in the warming shed playing pool. If I ever come down there after you tell me that you're playing hockey, and when in fact you're playing pool, you'll never go down there again. Wow, that resonated quite well with me, and I said, okay, because I really did want to play hockey. And I went down there, I never once, I put my skates on in the snowbank, never went in that warming shed that they had, never played pool, only because I was more interested in becoming a good hockey player. And again, I can thank my dad for that. You can't be a hockey player all your life, and there's life after hockey. And again, we get back to Maine, because life after hockey for me was coming back to Maine, and that's what I wanted to do. In the summertime, we had built this home in Maine, so I did have an opportunity all the years that I was playing pro hockey to come back to Maine and enjoy my life in Maine. But I did figure this out, that I knew that my mind would last longer than my legs. And sure enough, my legs kind of gave out, and now it's time to do something else. And so I came back to Maine to look for a job, have a career, and I was successful. It worked. I got into the insurance business, which incidentally my father was in previously. I strove again, set high goals, ended up learning from a mentor at the insurance agency where I worked for 10 years, and then went out on my own and purchased a small agency and built it up to a multi-million-dollar company. Again, I'm proud of my accomplishments, and they're driven by a desire to set goals and standards of work ethic that I think are maybe better than the person beside me. And that's, to me, what it takes to succeed. And so I had a wonderful life and still have a wonderful life here in Maine. In fact, I built that insurance agency, as I said to you. I ended up selling it, and don't you think that the phone rings, and I was given an opportunity to work for the state of Maine. And yes, I have a new job at age 65. I'm the director of the Bureau of Labor Standards for the state of Maine. I'm very proud of it. It makes me feel like I'm a kid all over again. It's another challenge, and so I guess doing things like that keeps you going, keeps you alive, and keeps you upbeat and positive. And that's who I am. I think that's a lot about what Maine is too, because I've been a part of Maine all my life, and I've learned so many things that were instilled in me by my father, things that were taught to me by other coaches. But one thing was always fresh in my mind, and I knew it to be cast in stone, was that Maine was the type of place that you wanted to live in, you wanted to work in. And if they would have had a professional team in Maine, I would have in the NHL. I would have definitely wanted to play here and stay here. But that's it. I'm Maine through and through all my life, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.